Hello and welcome to the Rally Point. Dominic Fielder, the author of the King's German series, and myself, Bob McLaren, the author of the Jobert series. This evening, Western Britain is being battered by storms and Dominic Fielder is unable to join us. But I would like to welcome our guest host, Mark Robbins from Australia. Good evening, Mark. How are you?
I'm excellent, Rob. I'm just sorry that Dominic can't join us. In
Now,
more ways than one.
Indeed. Each month at the Rally Point, we catch up with friends who enjoy the Napoleonic period. And now everyone, we are recording the first 30 minutes of the gathering. But once the recording is over, we remain online and the conversation continues. This month, we would like to welcome Hans Karl Weiss back to the Rally Point. Hans Karl is an experienced reenactor, an amateur historian, and is based in Bavaria. And Hans has been leading us through a series of conversations about the smoothbore flintlock musket. Well, Hans Karl, how are you?
Thanks, I'm fine. And I also regret that Dominic is not around, because now we will have a chance to see how oblique firing is working. And he seems to be a bit obsessed about oblique fire.
Yes.
So I'm sorry for that. But as you are recording, and maybe in the next series, then we can discuss this topic again. And thank you for inviting me.
So this evening, Hans Karl is going to describe the loading of the musket and its effect on tactics. He'll be comparing, is that correct, some of the different kinds of muskets and the types of fire that occur in the rank and file, just stepping away from the weapon itself into what's occurring in the rank and file and the impact of that. Or the series then takes us into larger formations, larger tactical ones.
Exactly. I will show you how the construction of the musket is having influence how to load it. And then loading a musket also can inflict problems when you are in rank and file, because your shoulder to shoulder and front rank to rear rank is about 30 to about 1 feet, about 30 centimeter. And so some construction makes it easier, some construction makes it less easy, and then just compare and what kind of firings did line units when they are in rank and file are deduce, and this is restricted to the drill ground, however, because then maybe in one of the next series we have to look in the much more interesting thing, how did they fire in real battle. So always, I put this photo in front because you see the situation a soldier is when he's staged, formed in a line infantry unit. One of the most common arrangements was 3 ranks, and as I told before, the tallest are in the first rank, the smallest are in the second rank, and the intermediate are in the third. We mentioned in the beginning also that Austrian drill regulations of 1807 was identical, with the exception that in the third rank the best shooters were. And now when you fire a musket, most people are not aware what kind of effect it has. So there you see firing of a musket with a blank, and it's look at the flash of the pan, how high it gets up. And you can imagine also that it will go to the side. And then you are touching your neighbor. And so the right-hand neighbor, he will get a blast of the flash. And you see what kind of fire is going out in the front. And think now, in the second rank, on the third rank, and all these lightnings and flashes and fires going up around you. So just bear this in mind with what people had to deal when they were firing muskets. This is the topic. and we just go on. And I classed the muskets in 3 classes. And this is the first class. It has a cylindrical touch hole and a conical ramrod. You remember from the first part, when I discussed the construction of the muskets, I touched this topic. Yes. And those muskets, they were the most built ones. And actually the most epic muskets of these times, like the French or the British one, they were this kind of construction. Then the second one is a cylindrical touch hole and a cylindrical ramrod. The benefit is you don't have to twist the ramrod when loading. Like the Austrians had it from 1798 onwards. And like the Bavarians had it, some states had it, but it was not so common as the first musket type. Then the third one, this is the conical touch hole and the self-priming pan with a cylindrical ramrod. And this made loading very, very easily because the pan was priming itself, so it didn't have to do it. And also you didn't have to wield the ramrod. And by this you were shortening the loading time. And also you don't have to move around as when you have the first kind of type musket. Then I just show you the kind of different muskets. I made a write-up. I don't show you all, but the most important ones, just to give you an idea of how long was a musket, what was the caliber, what was the powder charge, what were the facilities. Like one of the most built was the French Fusil d'Infanterie, and it was only outstepped by the British one, by the Brown Bess. And when you see in the first column, you see that the French caliber was 17.5 millimeter. And originally the caliber or diameter of the lead ball was 16.58 millimeter. And you had a windage of 0.92 millimeter. And the windage, of course, is playing a role because the less the windage, the more power you will have behind the ball when it's expelled from the gas of the exploding powder. Bear in mind, however, that as we told last time, around this lead ball also paper is rolled, so the windage is even shrinking. The very interesting thing is that the French reduced the caliber of the musket ball from 16.58 millimeter to 16, because in the French Revolution, they couldn't cope with production of the old regular infantry muskets. So they used whatever was in stock, whatever parts there were in stock, to make the so-called Model 1 or Model Revolution. And they reduced the caliber of the barrel to make loading easier, because the less the windage, the harder it is to pull down, to ram down the cartridge with your ramrod. And interesting is they had in front of the first ring, French muskets, there where the barrel was fixed with rings to the wooden stock, they had a front sight. And the ramrod was conical, so it had to be twisted. You take it out, what I will describe later. And the length was about 152 centimeter, weighed about 4.5 kilos. As told in the last part, you have a huge variation because they are still handmade. Then we come to the British muskets. They were of the identical making. So you had a conical ramrod, you had a cylindrical touch hole. And the most built of the British muskets was the India pattern, which replaced the short land service musket from 1797. And you see it had a much bigger caliber at 19.3 millimeter, and the ball caliber was about 17.6 millimeter. Then we move to the next one. Just to show the Austrian and the Prussian ones. The Austrian model of 1787 is like the Prussian models. And they had actually a cylindrical ramrod and a conical touch hole, which made a self-priming pen. And we touched also the topic of a flash screen in the last issue, in the last part, and they had a flash guard, because by the conical touch hole, which is very wide, the neighbor really got such a huge blast from the flash of the pen, so they had to protect it. Funnily enough, the Austrians, they stopped using the conical touch hole or self-priming pen with their new model of 1798 to 99. Why they did it, I don't know. There are some speculations about it. But they kept the cylindrical ramrod, so they still didn't have to wheel the ramrod. When they draw it out of the stock, they can go back into the barrel straight again. But the 1784 musket was virtually used during the whole Revolutionary Wars, and later it was used to equip the Landwehr units with it. So it was not thrown away; it was still used in the Napoleonic time. And then we have the Prussians, and they kept actually loyal to the conical touch hole and the cylindrical ramrod. And you see the model, the first one was the 1780 to 87. This model was used in the old Prussian army up to 1807. And it should have been replaced by the Nothat-Gewehr. When you look, it's a very, very small caliber actually compared to the other ones. But the war broke out and they didn't have enough in stock, only about 20,000. And only some few regiments got equipped with a Nothat-Gewehr, which was, according to some people, one of the best constructed in the Napoleonic time. And then this Nothat was replaced by the new Prussian musket of 1809, which was similar from outlook as the French or the Austrian models, but they kept the cylindrical ramrod and the conical touch hole. Now this may sound a bit confusing, but I will show you the differences how to load a musket. So a recruit had to be drilled how to load a musket, otherwise he couldn't fire it. And this is from the Westphalian regulations of 1810, using French style of musket, or in my classification, the first one. And you see, he had a shouldered musket. He has to bring it at the right side of the body. He has to open with his thumb the frizzen. And then he's reaching down to the cartridge pouch, getting the cartridge out. He still has to hold all the time the musket like this at the right side of the body. And as you see, also he makes a slight twist. It's not directly front, it's oblique. Then he's biting open or tearing open the paper cartridge. Then he's priming the pen. Then he has to close the pen. Then he has to swing the whole musket with the open cartridge to the left side. This you see here. He brings it at the left side of the body, and now the shoulders are square. Then he is loading the powder into the barrel. And then on top of that, he's using the rest of the paper with the ball. Then he has to draw ramrod, as you see here. He's extending it completely with the hand, and look how the thumb is placed. And now he has to twist it. He's just twisting it by just flicking the thumb upwards like this. And then it's almost directly over the muzzle of the barrel. Then you're pulling down, pushing down the ramrod, usually two times, to charge the the ball down to the bottom of the barrel. Then, of course, you have to reverse the musket again to replace it in the stock. Then when you are finished, you shoulder your musket, or in some firing mechanisms, you are just not shouldering it, you just go back at the ready. So this was drilled in the for the recruiting school, and as I told you, you would use a wooden flint for that. Just to show you to opening the cartridge, because there's a lot of myth about this. Like people were knocking out the front teeth so they could escape military. But in my opinion, this is complete nonsense. Try to bite up a piece of paper with your front teeth. You won't achieve it. So you use your side teeth. Then you just tear it open. Then you spit out the rest of the paper. And then you would use part of the powder of the cartridge to prime. So as you see, he's priming now the cartridge. After that, you would have to close the frizzen, and you have to bring the musket to the left side of the body. That's not so easy, actually, because you have, with 2 fingers, you have to close the opening of the cartridge. Then you have, with the cock, will rest at your wrist of the right hand, and then you twist it over, and then you bring the musket down at the bottom, and the right hand up to the barrel, to the muzzle. So this involves quite a lot of movement, and if you have to think about 600 men doing it, as long as they're doing it in unison, then it's maybe not so difficult. But when they're firing in battle and everybody is doing it at his own time, you can see that there's a bit confusion and movement only by loading the musket. So this was French-style musket. All the French army would load like this. This was British-style musket. All British troops would use it. And because the British also supplied huge amount of muskets to other states, like, for example, for the Russian army in 1812, they supplied 110,000. So they would use this kind of drill. They had to use this kind of drill as well, because the construction of the musket was determining how you could load it. And so now it's important to see how the Prussians did it. You see here again the British. When you compare to this one, there are only some minor details which are different, like not as high up, or maybe when they draw ramrods a bit different, but it's the same kind of way how to load the musket. Now you see the Prussian way, and they have the self-loading pen, and they have the cylindrical ramrod. Now you see he starts, when he had fired, he has to close he has to get the cock at half cock, close the pen, close the frizzen, sorry. Then he's bringing the musket down to the left immediately. And now he is grabbing the cartridge from the cartridge box. But already now the musket is at the left side of the body, and he has not to do the swinging to the left, holding the paper cartridge in the right hand. When you see a French soldier as a miniature or in a painting doing loading like this, that's wrong. He cannot load his kind of musket like this. This is only for Prussian, early Austrian or Saxon army. Then, of course, he has to do the same as usual, bite open the cartridge, put the powder into the musket. Then he's pulling the ramrod. He doesn't have to twist it. And by pushing down the ramrod with the ball, the pan is priming from the interior of the barrel, from the breech into the pan, because you have a conical touch hole which is wider, and also the plug screw is oblique, so you create a sort of a funnel, and then it's priming from the inside. So this is also makes it quite easier for the soldier actually to prime a pen. However, advantage, disadvantage, you must have, of course, good quality powder. If the powder is bad, then it will block the touch hole. Then he will present or make ready. And then you see he's firing. It's very interesting. Look how he's firing straight away, not even aiming, because some Prussian muskets still had a straight musket stock and they couldn't get the eyes in line with the sights. When you look at modern weapons, you have actually the same construction. For these reasons, you have the elevated sights. When you look at the old bolt action rifles, you have what we say a curved neck of the butt. So we see this loading is easier. He doesn't have to swing around the body, and you can maintain cohesion. And they say you can fire 3 times as fast as a French soldier, for example. The Saxon army, they used the same kind of style. As you can see from this soldier, you know, he's gripping, he's holding, he's taking out the cartridge, but the musket is already at the left side. Now, as we said previously, usually you were in 3 ranks. Front rank usually was kneeling, second and third rank were standing. And now we're touching how to fire these muskets. And of course, there was this volley firing or firing in 3 ranks, but you have to keep close. You had to sort of interlock. Here we see the, what's the British expression, making ready or ready? How would you say it?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And this is present, first rank, second rank, third rank. You see the third rank is make a small step to the right. If you look from top, you see the interlocking. This is the right foot of the first rank kneeling. Okay. These are the 2 feet of the middle rank. So when he's pushing back the right foot, he has to surpass actually the feet of the second rank. So it doesn't knock against the shin, but he has to go on the side. And here you see the feet of the third rank. He's making a small step to the right. So he has a sort of space where he can push the musket through. And this was important to keep all this cohesion and this interlocking, because otherwise the muskets wouldn't surpass to the front. Now, as we talked about in the last episode, you had, of course, oblique fire. And when you see this is oblique fire to the right, this is oblique fire to the left. And what makes the oblique fire to the left so problematic is usually when you fire, you always surpass the right side of the man in front of you. But when you do the oblique firing to the left, you have to use the left side. And when the first rank after firing is stepping up again, you have to keep your musket lined into this left side position, which is quite awkward because you're not accustomed to it. And it could cause a problem. But you see how close all this is, and it's very difficult to maintain. And of course, the longer you fire, the more difficult it is to keep the distances. This is just showing more than one rank, more than one file. This is from the Hessian army of 1814. You just see the 3 ranks. At the side is an NCO and an officer. And then you see they present the musket. What is also quite interesting is they point downwards. Okay, in the French drill regulations and in a lot of other ones, you had to point your musket lower than your shoulder. So this is a photo from reenactment. You just see how the mass of muskets when first rank is kneeling. And this is the only shot I found from oblique firing. And this is oblique firing to the left. And you see already how close the muzzle is to the hand of the soldier. So when you don't do it in good fashion, you might shoot off the hand of your man in front. And of course, with oblique firing, how oblique do you fire? You know, you can say, okay, it depends where my target is, but a target at a distance of 300 feet has a different oblique angle than a target which is maybe only 50 feet away, and where you stand. You know, when you stand at the right side of at the wing of your battalion, and you have to make an oblique fire to the left side of your own battalion, you have a completely different oblique angle. And maybe it becomes so oblique that you just can't do it because you would blow the head of the man in front of you. So in my opinion, a very difficult mechanism. I have found very rare examples actually showing that oblique firing was done in battle. In my opinion, I wouldn't do it actually. It's so dangerous. You see the British way, but you see also here the interlocking. Now he is just pushing the right leg in between the leg of the second rank, and quite difficult actually. Now you easily could hit his shin. So it's not that easy, but for the British, it's academic because they fought in 2 ranks anyway only. So, but you see, they found out a system how you keep interlocking, and it shows nicely how the musket of the 3rd rank is still surpassing the head of the 1st rank. Then another kind of, this was firing of the 3 ranks. Another fire which is usually forgotten, I think, by almost all French reenactment units, it's the feu par an. Why is it forgotten? Because it's not in the drill regulations. If you only read the French drill regulations, you will miss out a lot actually, because a lot of very important comments are in the Manuel de Infanterie, which is for the NCOs. And this is actually a page from the NCO instruction. And there you find the feu par an. So this is rank firing. So how they would do it? They would go into present, then 3rd rank will go in the ready, fire. Then they will go back, start loading, 2nd rank will fire, 3rd rank will fire. So rank by rank by rank. So you always have a reserve, and this was a firing mechanism actually advocated also by Napoleon. And again, they didn't just stuck to a drill regulation when it was not convenient. And like in Egypt, they did design firing in 3 ranks, which was even a bit different. Like there, the 3rd rank would fire, and the 1st rank would not kneel down, and then the 1st and 2nd rank would fire. Also in the feu par an, actually 1st rank was not kneeling down. They just kept standing. So consulting alone, the drill regulations won't help you to understand how armies fought. You must look at the handbooks for NCOs and officers. Same could be said for the British Army, like where Moore published some very important instructions, which then crept back in the rules and regulations of the British Army as well. Then you have the file firing. So this is not done by a complete battalion or half battalion. It's usually only done by a platoon or peloton. And it would start from the right file. They would fire, then the next file at the left would fire, and it would ripple through from the right to the left. And then whenever you fired, you would just start immediately after firing to load your musket again. So by that, you had a sort of continuous fire going up and down the whole line. The French had a bit of special method when they said feu de deux rangs. The second and the third rank were swapping muskets. So the second rank would shoot, would lean back to the third rank, they would swap muskets. Then he would shoot again and start loading, and the third rank was also loading. So they were always swapping muskets. So by that reason, you could use the third rank as a musket loader and increase the amount of muskets firing, because again, the front rank is not kneeling down at a fire by files. Again, I emphasize drill ground because in battle, most likely not done. The swapping of muskets, but file firing, yes. Just to sum up, you have volley firing, 3 ranks, 2 ranks, or only 1 rank, depend how are you placed. And of course, you could do volley firing by firing by each rank, as I explained previously. And this could be done by pelotons or platoons or companies. Then it could be done by half battalions or wings, and then by battalions. Oblique fire usually was only done by battalions or half battalions. You wouldn't do oblique firing anyway by pelotons. Then file firing you do by pelotons, platoons, or companies. And then, of course, you had the feu à volonté or fire at will, or what the Germans say, Bataillenfeuer, where everybody fired as he liked to fire. So everybody would fire as quick as possible, load as quick as possible. He wouldn't care of what the neighbor is doing, what the front rank is doing, what the rear rank is doing. He just would fire. And like the Prussians of 1806, they recommended this fire actually. While in the 7 Years' War, they didn't like fire at will. They emphasized more the platoon firing or battalion fire. This is from the French Army Museum, actually. You see is, as described, loading the musket, bringing the musket to the left. He has to turn the ramrod, reversing it, bringing back to the stock. Then he has to fire. They explain again how this looks like from the interior of a musket. As we explained in the past, the working together of flintlock construction. The flash in the pan would ignite the powder. Powder would explode, would push out the ball. Here you see a misfire and another one. But those muskets work. Unfortunately, you don't see the second and the third rank. You don't see a side shot. You see it only from the front. Here you see the swapping of muskets. And it worked nicely. So this was always then, you know, you see, it's a continuous fire. People, there will always be shots. And
Hans Carl, in no particular order, are there any records or diary accounts as to whether there were different range or hitting power due to the different weights and calibers of the muskets?
Yes. There's this important study of Scharnhorst who tested different muskets of different nations, I think from 1800 to about 1812. And then he published this über die Wirkung des Feuergewehrs. This actually I will include in a third part, maybe, or in a fourth. And then you can see the different hitting of like a British musket compared to a Prussian one. However, you have to bear in mind, this is very rudimentary because a British soldier would hit with his musket better than a Prussian soldier with a British musket. So it gives us only a sort of a guideline how the musket performing was. The problem is the heavier the ball, the more you have to carry as a soldier. And now in Rob, you were a professional soldier. You know, weight is a very important thing of a soldier.
Yes.
The lighter, the better, I say. And but on the other hand, it's like the Brits, they could fire French cartridges when they captured them, but French couldn't fire the British cartridge because it was too big, the ball, so they couldn't fire it. And the French, for example, they could use Austrian muskets and Austrian cartridges. They would fit into their musket, and actually, they a lot of Austrian muskets were incorporated in the French army in 1805, because against Muth, the French army of 1805 was not the best equipped one. It had very shoddy muskets, worn-out muskets, and then whenever they captured Austrian ones, they used them, not only muskets, actually also guns. So a lot of French guns at Austerlitz were actually from Austria.
That's a delicious irony.
Yeah.
Speaking of weight, was part of the advantage of the Notthart musket its lighter weight?
Yes, exactly. It was a lighter weight. Then it was compared to the other Prussian models, it had a less windage, and it had a smaller caliber. So it was not only a reduction in weight of the musket itself, but also of the weight of the cartridge. And it had a front sight as well, yes. And the bayonet was a bit longer to compensate for the lightness. And this usually should have replaced the old Prussian muskets of 1780, 87, which were in a very bad and worn out state, actually.
And you said it was better machined. Did that mean that it was more expensive and slower to manufacture, hence why it never went beyond 20,000?
Yes, you have to say you had two big nations. Foremost the British, and then the French. Like the Brits could build the India pattern in millions. The Prussians they never could do it. They never could do it. They could build 10,000 or 20,000 a year. The Brits did this a month easily. The same with the French. Also, the French model was built, I think, over 1 million French fusil infantry were just manufactured. And then, of course, they supplied it to their allies. And the Prussians, they just couldn't keep it up. It was a very, very, very poor nation and small. After 1807, it was halved. It had only 5 million people population, and beforehand it was 10 million. But it would take ages, like to produce 300,000 or 400,000 muskets to equip your line units with the new muskets. Even in the French, they used in 1805, they used all kinds of different models. They didn't use the Corrigé L'Enneuf. It was just came up. They would use muskets made in 1770, made in 1767, whatever. Only then, when they really the armies, they exploded in size. and they needed hundreds of thousands of muskets. And during the revolution, for example, before Britain and France was in war, the Brits produced French muskets for the French army.
You've mentioned the importance of powder several times.
Yes.
Was there any particular warring power that was known for having particularly good powder, or was it all dependent upon variable factory manufacture?
I think the Prussians must have had a good powder for these reasons, because they didn't, also the Saxons, for example, because they kept with the conical touch hole and the self-priming pen. And you can do it only with good powder. Also, I had a good discussion about the British powder, and also seemingly British powder was also very good, because usually when you fired 60 times with a musket with your cartridge, the barrel was quite fouled. Actually, I did it once in a reenactment 60 or 70 times, and I hardly could remove my ramrod any longer. But there are incidents about the British Army where they fired 100 times or 120 times, even 200 times. And you can do this only by very good quality of powder, where you don't have a lot of fouling, actually. French reputedly was not so good, but it could be hearsay as well. You know, at least they didn't find it necessary to change their powder, and they did win quite a lot of battles anyway.
Okay, thank you, everyone. A fascinating conversation so far, but I'm about to end our recording, but please stay online as we continue the chat. To wrap up this month's Rally Point, thank you, Hans Karl, for joining us.
Yeah, again, a pleasure. I think it's very complex and maybe confusing, but as you keep Rally Point open for discussion, I welcome if people get in touch with you. If there are some pressing questions, they could get in touch with you and ask. If they want clarification maybe about that and that subject, then I will try to answer it in a follow-up.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for that invitation for us to ask more questions. And Dominic and I will make efforts to invite as many people as we can to join our conversation. And we look forward to your next presentation in the series. Next time, allow me to invite the audience to join us here at Rally Point. Next time, I'm traveling in Europe, and Dominic and I will catch up with Gareth Glover and reenactors in September, and reenactors Victor Iser and Chris Frank at the reenactment at Leipzig in October. We'll continue Hans Karl's fascinating series on the musket, November into the next new year. So allow me to thank our guest host this evening, because Dominic is battled with storms and can't join us because the internet power is down. Mr. Mark Robbins, thank you.
It was a great pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
Everybody, simply contact Dominic and I for your Zoom invite. Our details are at the end of the video. Share a Rally Point with your friends so we can hear from them as well. And any previous Rally Point chats are up on our YouTube channel. So it's good morning from me. And without Dominic Fielder, it's good morning to Mark.